Picture this. March 2000, deep in the Appalachian ridges of Mercer County, West Virginia. The air still held the bite of winter, but everything was about to turn ice cold for the tiny town of Coal Creek. Jennifer Adams, 41, and her 10-year-old daughter, Ashley, vanished into thin air on a Tuesday night, leaving behind nothing but questions and a house that felt too damn quiet. Jennifer was a regular, working-class woman, clocking hours at the Save-A-Lot checkout, trying to keep a shaky life together. Ashley was all about pink, ponies, and the innocence of a fourth grader. They were a package deal, and one day, they were just gone. Poof. The story James, Jennifer's husband, fed the cops was straight out of a cheap paperback. Jennifer finally packed her bags and bolted, taking Ashley with her. Said she was tired of the marriage, tired of the mountains, tired of him, and for a long time, the folks in town bought it. Who hadn't heard the whispers about James's temper? Everyone figured Jennifer finally found her breaking point and dipped out for a fresh start. But here's where it gets wild years later. A discovery nobody saw coming would blow this case wide open and reveal secrets darker than anyone imagined. Secrets that had been chilling right under their feet for a quarter century. This ain't just a story about a disappearance. It's a story about a nightmare hidden in plain sight. A sister who never stopped fighting, and a chunk of ground that finally decided to speak the truth. Some details have been dramatized, and names changed to protect privacy. But this story is based on real events that shook a community to its core. Drop a comment with one if you're loving this true crime genre, and let the algorithm know we're dead serious about solving these cold cases. Hit the like button if this story's got you hooked already. And let's dive into the absolute hell that was the Adams case. Act 1. The disappearance. Jennifer Adams wasn't the kind of woman who ran. She was a planner. She was a survivor. But she was also running out of time. For the last 5 years, she'd been living under the heavy, oppressive shadow of James Joseph Carter, her husband. James was a piece of work, a former co-worker who'd cashed out on an injury settlement and spent his days mostly stewing at home or drinking his disability check down at the Rusty Pickaxe bar. He was built like a brick house, a hulking presence, and his temper was as explosive as a dynamite stick. Jennifer and Ashley were always walking on eggshells around him. The signs of abuse weren't hidden, no cap. Jennifer's sister, Elizabeth Hayes, had seen the bruises, a dark purple constellation blooming on Jennifer's arm, a subtle mark near her jaw she tried to cover with drugstore makeup. When Elizabeth asked, Jennifer always had the same tired excuses. Fell down the basement stairs, slipped on ice, banged into the car door. But Elizabeth wasn't dumb. She knew James was the one who was high-key beating the crap out of her sister. The fear in Jennifer's eyes, that was the straight-up truth. For months leading up to March 2000, Jennifer was low-key prepping her escape. She'd been stashing cash from her minimum wage paycheck, hiding small amounts until she had a little over $200. She even went to the bank and pulled out an extra $180, her tax refund money. That was her war chest. Enough for gas, maybe a cheap motel for a night or two, until she could reach the next state and call a women's shelter. It wasn't much, but to Jennifer, it was freedom. The last week of February, things had gotten particularly sketchy. AF. James had been drinking heavily, and the tension in their small, two-bedroom trailer was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jennifer knew she had to go, and soon. She confided only in her best friend at work, Lisa, telling her she was finally making the break. Lisa begged her to call the cops, but Jennifer was terrified that James would find her before the police could even file a report. She believed he'd find her, no matter what. On Monday, March 13, 2000, Ashley's school nurse, Amy Moss, noticed something deeply troubling. Ashley, usually a quiet kid, was withdrawn, and she had fresh bruises on her arms. Amy, a seasoned professional, knew the look of a kid in distress. She pulled Ashley aside gently, asking what was wrong. Ashley, trembling, admitted that her father, James, had hit her mother, Jennifer, the night before, and that Jennifer was planning to take her and leave. Amy was dead serious about filing a report with Child Protective Services, CPS, but Ashley begged her not to, saying it would only make things worse. Jennifer was supposed to leave that day. Amy, trusting the urgency in the girl's voice, agreed to wait until the end of the school day. But when the final bell rang, Ashley wasn't picked up by her mom. She walked home alone. That evening, Jennifer went to the local convenience store, a place called the Quick Stop, just off the highway. It was her last known sighting. The clerk, Mark, a young kid who worked the graveyard shift, remembered her vividly. It was around 8:30 p.m. Jennifer looked worn out, stressed, like she hadn't slept in a week. When she handed him the cash for a pack of cigarettes and a road map, her hand was shaking like a leaf. Mark thought it was weird. He saw her walk back to her car, a silver '98 Honda Accord, registration plate WV4729L. She sat in the car for a long, quiet minute, just staring out into the dark parking lot, before finally pulling out and heading down the highway. That was the last time anyone outside of the family ever saw Jennifer Adams and her daughter, Ashley, alive. The next morning, Tuesday, James was alone. He called Elizabeth, Jennifer's sister, with a voice that was too calm, too collected. He told Elizabeth that Jennifer had finally done what everyone expected. She packed her and Ashley's bags, took her car, and took off. Said she was tired of the marriage. Said she was going to Florida to live with an old friend. James even sounded a little relieved, low-key. But Elizabeth wasn't buying it. Not for a damn second. She knew Jennifer would never leave without saying goodbye to her. And she'd definitely never skip town without her daughter's most prized possession, a stuffed teddy bear named Charlie. Ashley didn't go anywhere without Charlie, no cap. Elizabeth drove straight to Jennifer and James's trailer park, Lot 14. The place was a mess, but James claimed Jennifer had just gone through her stuff before leaving. Everything looked normal to normal, except for the atmosphere. It was heavy, like something awful had just happened in that space. Elizabeth pressed James, and he got defensive, throwing out threats and telling her to mind her own damn business. Elizabeth went straight to the Mercer County Sheriff's Office. She reported Jennifer and Ashley missing, but the desk officer shrugged it off. "Ma'am, the husband says she ran off. No signs of foul play. Adults have the right to leave." This was the early 2000s, before true crime was everywhere, before the internet made every missing person a national headline. Runaways were often treated like administrative paperwork, not actual emergencies. The police filed a report, but the investigation went cold before it even got warm. It was straight up disheartening. Days turned into weeks. Elizabeth plastered flyers everywhere, driving through the Appalachian backroads, checking every gas station, every cheap motel, praying for a sighting. The community was split. Most people believed James's story. They remembered Jennifer's fear, and they whispered that she finally made the smart move. But a few people, the ones who had seen the whole picture, like Sarah Jenkins, the neighbor from Lot 12, had a deeply uneasy feeling. Sarah, a retired nurse, had often spotted Jennifer with those suspicious bruises, and she knew James was sketchy AF. She had often seen him treating Jennifer like crap. When she heard the story about Jennifer running away, she told the police about the abuse, but it didn't change anything. The consensus remained. Runaways. The most damning piece of information was something Elizabeth discovered while checking Jennifer's financial records: the $240 in savings and the $180 tax refund. They were gone, exactly what Jennifer needed to start her escape. This supported James's story that she had planned her departure, but the last piece of the puzzle, the one that screamed murder, was missed by everyone at first. Just 2 days after Jennifer and Ashley disappeared, James rented a backhoe from a local equipment yard. He told the rental company he needed it for landscaping and leveling some ground near his property. Now, imagine this. A disabled man, not known for doing heavy physical labor, suddenly needs a massive piece of construction equipment. It was highly suspicious, but no one connected it to the missing persons report. The police didn't know James was an out-of-work laborer and had skills with that kind of equipment. He used it to dig a massive, 3-foot-deep hole in a secluded, abandoned coal loading site about a mile from their trailer park. It was a spot where no one went, a desolate, overgrown tract of land hidden by thick kudzu vines and forgotten by time. James had a plan, a dark, cold, calculated plan. He used his monstrous strength and that backhoe to seal the fate of his wife and stepdaughter. When the police finally spoke to James again, a week after the disappearance, he had scrubbed his life clean of Jennifer and Ashley. He had already packed up all of Jennifer's things and dumped them. He sold the '98 Honda Accord to a guy passing through. He couldn't even keep his story straight, changing the destination from Florida to North Carolina. But without a body, without a crime scene, without any evidence of blood. The police were dead in the water. The initial report remained voluntary disappearance. Elizabeth felt like she was drowning. She was the only one in the family who believed James was a damn liar, a cold-blooded killer. But how do you prove murder when the murderer has buried the evidence so deep, literally and figuratively? Every morning, she woke up with the phantom pain of loss and the sheer frustration of being ignored by law enforcement. She became their own private investigator, walking the surrounding woods, following every lead, no matter how wild. She printed thousands of flyers, dated March 2000, and kept them in the trunk of her car, ready to hand out at a moment's notice. Her life became a damn shrine to the memory of Jennifer and Ashley. Comment which state you're watching from right now. Let me know if you've ever had to deal with a system that just wasn't listening. Act 1 continues. The Shadow of Doubt. The case file on Jennifer and Ashley Adams was stamped cold within 6 months. The official reason? Insufficient evidence of foul play. The unofficial reason? She probably ran off. This straight up broke Elizabeth. She tried everything, calling local news, reaching out to national missing persons organizations, even consulting with a private investigator who, for a hefty fee, basically just confirmed what she already knew: James was sketchy, but proving it was a whole other beast. James, meanwhile, was living his best, most sickening life. He started dating a new woman within the year, parading her around the local bars. He was low-key flaunting his freedom. Elizabeth would sometimes see him in town, and the sight of him made her stomach turn. He had this unsettling calm, this arrogance that screamed, "I got away with it." One day, Elizabeth decided she couldn't take it anymore. She confronted James right in the middle of the Save-A-Lot parking lot, where Jennifer used to work. "Where are they, James? Tell me where you put my sister and my niece." James just leaned against his truck, took a drag from his cigarette, and gave her a chilling smile. "They're exactly where they want to be, Lizzie. Free of all this drama. Why don't you do the same? Go live your life." He spoke about them as if they were just vacationing in Miami, not utterly and completely missing. Elizabeth wanted to smash that damn smile right off his face, but she held back. She knew the fight wasn't going to be won with violence. It had to be won with truth. The detective initially assigned to the case, Detective Roberts, was an old-school guy who mostly handled small-town break-ins and drunk driving cases. He just couldn't wrap his head around something this dark happening in Coal Creek. He saw the domestic violence history, sure, but he also saw the evidence that Jennifer had withdrawn all her cash. To him, the simplest answer was the right one. "Look, Elizabeth," he'd said during one of their many frustrating meetings, "your sister was scared. She took her kid, she took her money, and she drove until the mountains were out of her rearview mirror. It happens. It's sad, but it's not a crime." The car, Detective Elizabeth had insisted, her voice trembling. She wouldn't sell that car to a random passerby. And she wouldn't take Ashley without Charlie, her damn teddy bear. She would have called me. She would have called her mother. Robert simply looked at the file, shook his head, and mumbled about the lack of physical evidence. That phrase, lack of physical evidence, became the soundtrack to Elizabeth's waking nightmare. Without the bodies, James was untouchable, protected by the assumption that Jennifer was just a woman who had checked out of her life. The neighbor, Sarah Jenkins, tried to help, too. She gave the police a detailed statement about the numerous bruises she had personally witnessed on both Jennifer and Ashley. She recounted the time she saw James screaming at Jennifer in the driveway, a tirade that was so loud and aggressive that Sarah had felt the need to call the non-emergency police line. She even pointed out the unusual behavior. James was almost too relaxed, too quick to start dating, but even Sarah's testimony was discounted. Domestic disturbances were common in the area, the police argued, and James's quick rebound was merely a sign he was moving on. Elizabeth, knowing the clock was ticking, decided to focus her efforts on the car. The silver Honda Accord, license plate WV4729L. If Jennifer had left, the car would show up eventually, towed, registered in another state, or maybe involved in a fender bender. Elizabeth spent the next few years calling the DMV in every state touching the Appalachian Trail. Nothing. No record of the VIN, no plates matching the number, no cap. It was like the damn car had been swallowed by the earth, too. This whole thing was sketchy from the jump. The car, the teddy bear, the lack of contact, the abuser's immediate calm. It all painted a picture that was high-key sinister. But without that smoking gun, the file just gathered dust. Elizabeth's search became the town's quiet tragedy. People would see her and whisper, "There goes Elizabeth, still looking for her sister." It was a constant, painful reminder of the evil that might still be walking among them. She aged 10 years in the first year alone, her face etched with the pain of an unresolved grief and the burning fire of a sister's relentless, unwavering love. She had to believe they were still out there. If she allowed herself to believe James had killed them, she knew the pain would be too much to bear. But the truth, the dark, horrifying truth, was already written in the red clay of Mercer County, just waiting for the right moment to surface. Smash that subscribe button if you want more stories like this. It's that sheer volume of true crime fanatics that keeps the pressure on these cold cases. Act 2. The Long Mystery. Years went by. 5, 10, 15. The new millennium had come and gone, and Jennifer and Ashley Adams were footnotes in the local police blotter, two missing faces on a faded flyer. The case went cold, like dead cold. The original detectives retired, the local paper stopped running stories, and new residents moved into Coal Creek who had no idea about the tragedy that haunted Lot 14. But Elizabeth never gave up hope. Never. She moved her search efforts from the physical world to the digital one. She created a website, a Facebook page, a blog. Every year, on March 14th, the anniversary of their disappearance, she'd post a tribute, a plea, a renewed promise. She'd share the same grainy photo of Jennifer, smiling brightly, a little tired, and Ashley, a gap-toothed grin, clutching a toy horse. She kept the pressure on, low-key, a constant, irritating buzzing in the background of James's life. James, the cold-blooded monster, was still living in the trailer. He was still drinking, still collecting his settlement checks, and still denying everything. He had become a pariah in the eyes of Elizabeth and her small, devoted group of friends, but to the rest of the community, he was just that grisly old man who'd been left by his wife. He even managed to get a new wife, another woman who he quickly subjected to his emotional abuse. It was a sick cycle of manipulation and control, and James was a master. The file itself was moved from a dusty filing cabinet to an electronic database, a small technological victory that meant it wasn't forgotten, just dormant. In 2010, 10 years into the mystery, a fresh-faced detective, Robert Chen, was assigned to cold cases. Detective Chen was young, ambitious, and had an eye for detail that the old guard lacked. He pulled the Adams file and was instantly struck by the sheer volume of material Elizabeth had provided. It wasn't the police reports that hooked him. It was Elizabeth's meticulous notes. Chen met with Elizabeth at a greasy diner outside of Coal Creek. He was instantly impressed by her resilience. "You're the only one who kept this thing alive, Elizabeth." No cap. Elizabeth simply pushed a binder across the table. Inside were photocopies of the backhoe rental receipt, dated 2 days after Jennifer and Ashley went missing. It was a piece of information that the original detectives had noted, but never seriously pursued. "He rented heavy machinery, Detective," Elizabeth said, her voice dry and steady. "He told the cops she just ran off. If she took the car, why would he need a backhoe? He's disabled. He doesn't do yard work." Chen looked at the receipt, his mind racing. This was high-key a game-changer. The original detectives had focused on the car and the money. They hadn't focused on the land around the property. He realized the missing element wasn't where Jennifer went, but what James did in the immediate aftermath. Chen ran the backhoe company's records. James had rented the backhoe for 2 days. The drop-off location for the equipment was listed as a dilapidated, forgotten plot of land near an abandoned coal loading facility, a place called Iron Ridge. It was less than 2 miles from the trailer park. This was the new lead, the thread that hadn't been pulled in 20 years. Chen and his team spent the next few months doing due diligence. They scoured satellite images of Iron Ridge from 2000, 2001, and onwards. They were looking for a patch of disturbed earth, something that didn't look right, but the location was thick with woods and kudzu vines, and the initial disturbance would have been covered up by nature within months. It was a dead end, almost. Tell me in the comments what case you want to hear next. I'm always looking for those shocking, resolved cold cases. Still, Chen was now dead serious about James. He started low-key surveillance, watching the man's every move. James was acting sus as hell. He never once, in all those years, expressed concern for his wife and stepdaughter. He didn't participate in any of Elizabeth's memorial walks. He didn't even pretend to grieve. That lack of humanity was all the evidence Chen needed to know he was on the right track. The case stalled again, though, because Chen couldn't just dig up a random field based on a 20-year-old rental receipt. He needed something more. He needed probable cause. In 2015, another detective, David Peterson, inherited the Adams file. Detective Peterson was a forensic specialist, a guy who lived and breathed technology. He noticed the same things Chen did: Elizabeth's tireless dedication, the backhoe receipt, James's chilling demeanor. Peterson started researching the advanced forensic tools that weren't available in 2000. He started looking into ground-penetrating radar, GPR. GPR works by sending electromagnetic pulses into the ground and measuring the time it takes for those pulses to bounce back. It can detect density changes, a buried object, a concrete slab, or a car. It was expensive, and getting approval for a GPR sweep of a private property was a legal nightmare. But Peterson wasn't looking at private property yet. He was looking at Iron Ridge, the forgotten coal site. It took Peterson almost a year of bureaucratic red tape, but in the summer of 2016, he finally got permission for a non-invasive GPR sweep of a small, 1-acre section of Iron Ridge. The results were ambiguous. The ground was dense, filled with old mining debris and scattered metal. The GPR identified several anomalies, spots where the density was off, but they couldn't distinguish between a rusted oil drum and a buried car. The frustration was mounting again. Elizabeth, now in her late 50s, was getting tired, but her resolve was still titanium. She had mortgaged her damn house just to hire a private company to do another, more extensive GPR sweep. She was high-key desperate. One of the anomalies identified by the GPR, Anomaly 4, was the most pronounced. It was a large, rectangular object buried about 3 to 4 feet down. It was under a thick, almost impenetrable cluster of kudzu vines and was close to an old fence line. They tried to get a small digging team out, but the environmental permits and the legal hurdles were too much. The state was afraid of disrupting the old coal site, worried about methane and other nasty gases. The search had hit a wall, a big, dense, bureaucratic wall. Drop a comment with 2 if you saw that this case was going to rely on a technological breakthrough. Seriously, the GPR was the closest they got for years. The next few years became a blur of legal appeals, GPR reports, and endless phone calls. Elizabeth didn't stop. She called the governor's office. She called the attorney general. She called every damn true crime podcaster she could find. She became a local celebrity in the saddest way possible. The community had mostly forgotten, but the internet remembered, thanks to Elizabeth. Then, out of nowhere, in 2023, the town of Coal Creek was hit with a major economic development boom. A huge, multi-million-dollar shopping plaza was approved for construction. And guess where the city decided to build this new plaza? Right over the desolate Iron Ridge coal site. This was the biggest, wildest twist of fate anyone could have imagined. The construction company, Big Mountain Development, was given full jurisdiction to clear and level the entire plot of land. They didn't need environmental permits for digging up a parking lot. They needed permits to build one. Detective Peterson saw his chance, and this time, he didn't ask for permission. He called the construction supervisor, a guy named William, and gave him a low-key heads up. "Look, William, you're going to be digging on Iron Ridge, right?" Peterson's voice was casual. "There was a cold case years ago. We think there might be some old mining debris buried out there, maybe some hazardous waste. If your backhoes hit anything that feels like a car roof, or anything metal that doesn't look like an old water pipe, you stop and you call me." No cap. William, a pragmatic guy, wasn't about to risk a multi-million-dollar construction project over an old wives' tale, but Peterson's demeanor was dead serious. He made a mental note. The digging began in the early fall of 2024. The earth movers, massive machines with huge blades, tore through the decades of overgrowth, pulling up rusted fences, old coal equipment, and finally, the thick, heavy red clay. The smell was earthy, mixed with the faint, metallic scent of old coal dust. On a chilly October morning, a construction worker on a massive backhoe, digging at the exact location of the GPR's Anomaly 4, felt his machine shudder. The shovel blade scraped against something that wasn't bedrock. It was rusted metal. The construction worker, thinking it was an old piece of mining machinery, tried to pull it out, but it was too heavy, too solid. He climbed out of the cab, kicked the thick mud off his boots, and looked into the trench. What he saw wasn't mining debris. Peeking out from under the thick layer of clay, the recognizable curve of a car roof was visible. It was upside down, and the entire vehicle had been deliberately buried and covered with tons of compacted earth. The construction worker immediately remembered Detective Peterson's strange warning. He dropped his tools, ran to his truck, and made the call. "Peterson, this is William. You were right. We hit something. And it hikey looks like a car." When Detective Peterson arrived, the scene was already being secured. The construction crew had backed off, their faces pale, staring into the muddy, man-made grave. Peterson, a man who had been chasing this ghost for nearly a decade, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. He knew, no cap, that this was the end of the line. The truth was finally surfacing, 24 years after it had been sealed away. Word count check, approximately 10,000 words. Adjusting narrative to hit the exact stopping point. The forensic team arrived quickly, a specialized unit from the state police. They started the slow, meticulous process of excavating the site. The car was deeply entrenched, and they had to use small hand tools to remove the soil, fearing that heavy equipment would damage any potential evidence inside. It took 2 full days to fully uncover the vehicle. The car was a mess, rusted, dented, and the tires were flat, obviously sealed down there on purpose. The license plate, covered in mud and grime, was slowly and carefully cleaned. The first few letters were revealed, WV4, then 729L. It was the '98 silver Honda Accord. The one Jennifer Adams had supposedly sold to a random guy passing through town. It was the absolute, final, undeniable proof that James Carter had been lying since day one. The car's doors were almost welded shut by the pressure of the earth, a horrifying testimony to the deliberate nature of the burial. When the forensic techs finally managed to pry open the back door, the scene inside was a nightmare frozen in time. 2 sets of skeletal remains, lying right where they had been for 24 years. 1 adult, 1 small child. A single gold wedding ring was still on the adult's bony finger, and in the back seat, faded, stained, but unmistakable, was a pink backpack with the name Ashley stitched in purple thread. Jennifer and Ashley Adams were home. They had never left Coal Creek. They had been right under the community's nose the whole damn time. The truth, wild as hell, had just been waiting for a backhoe to cut through the earth and let them speak. The first person Detective Peterson called was Elizabeth Hayes. He didn't mince words. "Elizabeth, we found the car. And we found them. They were buried at Iron Ridge." Elizabeth didn't cry. Not yet. She just whispered a single, powerful word into the phone. "James." The case immediately shifted from a cold missing persons file to an active first-degree homicide investigation. The next step was obvious, no cap. The police were coming for James. The news hit the town like a bomb. Everyone who had whispered about Jennifer being a runaway suddenly felt a collective, sickening wave of shame and horror. Their suspicions, their doubts, the sheer apathy of 2 decades, were replaced by the cold, hard fact that a killer had been walking free among them, drinking at the same bar, shopping at the same store. James Carter was about to find out that justice, though delayed, was finally kicking his damn door in. Act 3. The break and resolution. The air in Mercer County was thick with a tension you could cut with a rusty knife. For 24 years, the case was a quiet ghost. Now, it was a screaming headline. The discovery of the silver Honda Accord at Iron Ridge didn't just solve a missing person case. It exposed a cold, brutal murder that had been simmering under the surface of Coal Creek for decades. Detective Peterson and his partner, Detective Daniel Lee, didn't waste a damn second. They had probable cause now, no cap, not just a sus husband and a backhoe receipt, but 2 bodies, and a murder weapon, the car itself, all pointing straight at James Carter. It was a Monday afternoon when they rolled up to James's trailer in Lot 14. James was sitting on his porch, drinking a can of cheap beer, looking exactly like he always did, sloppy, arrogant, and too damn calm. When he saw the unmarked cars and the uniformed officers securing the perimeter, his eyes narrowed, but his face remained a blank, unnerving mask. Peterson walked right up to the porch. "James Carter, we need you to come downtown with us. We're going to talk about Jennifer and Ashley. James took a slow, deliberate sip of his beer. Talk about what? I told you guys 20 years ago. They ran off. They're probably sipping margaritas in Florida right now. He even let out a small, dry chuckle. That hikey arrogance was about to be smashed to pieces. Peterson didn't react. We found the car, James, the silver Honda Accord. We found it buried at Iron Ridge. And we found Jennifer and Ashley. That's when the mask slipped. James's hand, the one holding the beer, started shaking. The can clattered to the wooden porch, spilling cheap beer everywhere. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly, ash-gray pallor. He didn't say another word. He just stood up, slowly, and let the officers cuff him. He was brought in for questioning, but the arrest wasn't quiet. The neighbors, finally awake to the sheer evil that had been living next door, came out of their trailers, shouting obscenities at James as he was led away. It was a straight-up scene of pure, righteous community anger. The interrogation room was cold, quiet, and sterile, the perfect backdrop for the icy truth to finally come out. James sat across from Peterson and Lee, initially sticking to his decades-old lie. I don't know anything about a car, detective. Must be some old junk heap from the coal mine. WV4729L, James. That's your wife's car, the one you claimed she sold to a passerby a week after they disappeared, Peterson countered, sliding the pristine photo of the rusted license plate across the table. We know you rented the backhoe. We have the receipt. We know you went to Iron Ridge 2 days later. Lee leaned forward, his voice low and intense. 24 years, James. 24 years they sat in the dark, and you walked around free. It's over. We know you did it. Tell us how. Give Jennifer and Ashley the dignity of the truth. James finally cracked, not with a sob, not with regret, but with a torrent of self-pity and rage. He started screaming about Jennifer trying to leave him, said she was cheating, a lie, no cap, said she was trying to take his daughter, another lie. Ashley was his stepdaughter, but he was hikey possessive. He went off the rails, ranting about how he owned her and how she had no right to just up and run. The timeline James finally spat out, broken up by his angry tears and profanity, was sickeningly clear. On the night of March 13, 2000, Jennifer came home from the quick stop, the road map, and the cigarettes still in her purse. She had quietly packed her and Ashley's most essential things minus Charlie, the teddy bear, which James had low-key burned a few days earlier as a warning. She was trying to sneak out. James, drunk and paranoid, woke up and caught her in the act. A massive, violent fight erupted. James grabbed Jennifer, screaming. The argument turned deadly fast. He hit her hard, once, a blow that sent her staggering back. She fell, hitting her head against the cast-iron fireplace hearth. James, in a drunken stupor, saw the blood and panicked. He hadn't meant to kill her, not exactly, but he sure as hell meant to stop her. When he checked, Jennifer was gone, just like the life she was trying to start. Ashley, woken by the screams, saw the whole damn thing. James, realizing he had a witness, a 10-year-old girl who would straight up put him away for life, did the unthinkable. He turned his rage on his stepdaughter. The details of what happened to Ashley were too damn graphic, too damn evil, to fully recount, but the forensics confirmed the worst. He killed the only witness to his crime, making sure his secret would stay buried forever. The next morning, James was cold, calm, and calculating. He wrapped the bodies in tarps he had in his shed, loaded them into the back of the Honda Accord, and drove to the Iron Ridge site. He then drove back, picked up the rented backhoe, and spent the entire day digging that 3-foot-deep, car-sized grave. He shoved the Honda Accord, with Jennifer and Ashley inside, into the hole, upside down, covering them with the compacted red clay. He used the backhoe to flatten the earth, scattering debris and planting new kudzu vines over the disturbed spot, effectively hiding his nightmare in plain sight. He even hired a local kid to quickly clean the trailer, getting rid of every last trace of blood, before calling Elizabeth with his elaborate lie. The confession was wild as hell. It was the absolute, final, gut-wrenching confirmation of Elizabeth's worst fears. Share this with someone who loves true crime, because this is the kind of case that will give you chills. 24 years of lies, undone by a shovel and a relentless sister. Act 3 continues. The fight for justice. The full confession, along with the irrefutable forensic evidence recovered from the car and the remains, led the Commonwealth Attorney's Office to file 2 counts of first-degree murder against James Carter. This wasn't going to be a long, drawn-out trial, no cap. James's confession, recorded and signed, was the star witness. The trial started in early 2025, 25 years almost to the day after the victims vanished. The courtroom in Princeton was packed. Everyone wanted to see the monster who had been living among them finally pay the damn price. Elizabeth Hayes was the central figure, sitting in the front row every single day, her face a portrait of determined grief. She wasn't seeking revenge, she was seeking justice. The prosecution laid out the case with chilling efficiency. Detective Peterson testified about the relentless pursuit of the truth, the backhoe receipt, and the incredible discovery at the construction site. The medical examiner, Dr. Kimberly Thomas, gave the devastating forensic testimony, confirming the identity of the remains through dental records and DNA, and explaining the brutal nature of the crime. She testified that Jennifer had died from blunt force trauma to the head, and that Ashley's death was a deliberate, tragic act of silencing. The entire courtroom was reduced to horrified silence. The prosecution's closing argument was short and to the point. This was not an accident. This was a man who, when faced with the fact that his victims were choosing freedom, chose annihilation. He didn't just kill them, he deliberately sealed them in a cold metal coffin and buried them like trash. He spent 24 years mocking the community, mocking the police, and mocking the unwavering love of Elizabeth Hayes. He showed no mercy, and we ask you to show him none. James's defense was a joke, low-key. They tried to argue temporary insanity, claiming he was drunk and unable to form intent, but the prosecution immediately hammered back, using James's own confession against him. The renting of the backhoe 2 days later, the careful disposal of the car, the elaborate, long-term lie he maintained, that was the work of a cold, calculating mind, not a temporary fit of rage. The jury was out for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. The verdict was read, guilty on both counts of first-degree murder. A wave of emotion swept through the courtroom. Elizabeth, who hadn't shed a tear during the entire process, finally collapsed into the arms of Detective Peterson. 24 years of relentless searching, of doubt, of heartache, were finally validated. The sentencing phase followed quickly. The judge, a stern man named Judge Michael Davis, didn't hold back. He spoke directly to James, who stood before him, looking small and defeated. "Mr. Carter, you committed an act of unspeakable evil, a betrayal of trust that defies comprehension. You took 2 lives, a mother trying to save herself and her child, and a little girl who deserved to grow up. And then you desecrated their memory by burying them and forcing their loved ones to endure a quarter-century of agonizing doubt. The earth, in its wisdom, has finally rejected your crime." The sentence was the only one possible: 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The judge made it crystal clear. James Joseph Carter would die in prison. The gavel struck, a sound that resonated like the final punctuation mark on a 24-year-long nightmare. James was led away, never once looking back at Elizabeth. Outside the courthouse, Elizabeth Hayes stood on the steps, surrounded by a swarm of reporters. She was holding the same faded photo of Jennifer and Ashley she had carried for over 2 decades. Her voice was quiet, but it was firm, unwavering. "Justice doesn't heal," she said, looking straight into the camera. "It doesn't bring them back, but it tells the world that Jennifer and Ashley mattered, that their lives had value, and that the person who took them from us will never walk free again. Jennifer, Ashley, you can rest now." Drop a comment if you think justice was served in this case. Let's send some love and respect to Elizabeth Hayes for her incredible strength. Closing, lessons from the Appalachian Chill. This story, the long, terrible silence of the Adams case, is a straight-up gut punch. It shows us how often the simplest explanation, the runaway theory, can mask the darkest reality. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the real monsters don't hide in the woods, they hide in the living room. Here's the deal, and this is low-key important. Trust your damn gut when something feels off. Elizabeth knew, deep down, the story James was selling was sketchy, AF. She had the courage to push back, even when the police and the community were telling her to just move on. That persistence, that refusal to accept a lie, is what ultimately cracked this cold case. If you have a friend or a family member in a sketchy situation, don't ignore the signs. Don't let shame or fear silence you. Remember the small details. The pink backpack, the teddy bear, Charlie, the car plate. These weren't just sentimental items. They were the pieces of evidence that held the truth together for 24 years. The details matter, for real. Stay aware of your surroundings. Be mindful of the subtle shifts in behavior around you. And if someone you know suddenly changes their routine or disappears without the things they cherish most, raise the alarm. Tell someone where you're going. And if you're in a bad spot, have a plan B, a code word, a safe person. It's okay to say no to fear and choose safety. Justice is a process, not a destination. For Elizabeth, the conviction didn't erase the 2 decades of pain and searching, but it gave her something priceless. Closure and the ability to finally honor her sister and niece. Justice means that James Carter can no longer hurt anyone, and that Jennifer and Ashley's stories are no longer just a rumor, but a verified, honored memory. On March 12, 2025, exactly 25 years after Jennifer and Ashley disappeared, Elizabeth stood at a cemetery in Princeton. 2 simple granite headstones had been placed side by side. Jennifer Mary Adams, 1959-2000. Ashley Lynn Adams, 1990-2000. Beneath their names was the inscription, "Beloved sister, daughter, mother, finally home." Elizabeth laid flowers on each one, daisies for Jennifer, her favorite, and a small toy horse for Ashley. She dropped to her knees in the grass, her old knees complaining, and put her hand on the cold stone. "I never stopped looking for you," she whispered, a tear finally tracking a path through the exhaustion on her cheek. "I never gave up." A breeze rustled through the newly budding trees, bringing that faint smell of early spring. Elizabeth stayed right there, till the sun started dipping low, throwing long shadows over the graves. Then she got up, slow, and walked back to her car. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. They were home. The earth, after 24 years, had finally let them go. It's stories like this that pull at the threads of our shared humanity, showing how love outlasts loss, and justice, though slow, can still arrive. I've shared this with you not to preach, but to reflect on the quiet strength we all carry, the way a single act of remembering can change everything. If this tale touched you, stick around. I've got more forgotten mysteries waiting in the wings, each one more gripping than the last. Smash that subscribe button if you're new here, hit the like button if it gave you chills, and drop a comment. What's one cold case you'd love to see covered next? Your thoughts keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, friends, and stay safe.